This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Mali's interim president has been sworn in, marking the start of the country's return to civilian rule since the military staged a coup in August. Death toll from a suspected rebel attack in eastern DRC climbs to 11. And fears of food shortages in South Sudan as floods displace more than 1 million people. Hello and a very warm welcome to you wherever you're joining us. This is Africa Live only on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua live in Nairobi. Ramanyang joins me now with your business headlines.
That's right, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Sudan's quest for debt relief suffers yet a new political setback. And Kenya's capital markets regulators raising the red flag over Citon Investments' failure to pay back $1 million to investors. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Mahia.
Rama, thank you. We start in Mali, where former Defense Minister Ba Ndao has been sworn in as interim president at a ceremony in Bamako. The 70-year-old Ndao will serve for 18 months before a transition to civilian rule. In his inaugural speech, Ndao promised a stable, calm and successful transition in the agreed conditions and time frame. The inauguration marks the start of Mali's return to civilian rule following a military coup there in August. Junta leader Colonel Assimi Goita will serve as vice president. Goodluck Jonathan, the envoy for Regional Bloc Economic Community of West African states, has said he hopes the inauguration will lead to the lifting of sanctions imposed by the bloc. Well, for more on this, we are now joined by Mamadou Tapili, a Malian journalist based in Bamako. Mamadou, a number of pledges made today. Tell us more about the commitments made at that ceremony. Mamadou, as we just asked, just do tell us more about the commitments made at the ceremony earlier today in Bamako.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I mean the inauguration ceremony took place as usual in CICB, which is the National Conference Center of Bamako. His Excellency Mr. Ba Ndao declared that he will be working as the charge of these nominations to the head of the states of the government, to the head of the state to lead this transition time. He will focusing more on the elections. I mean, this election which has been always contested, which kind of election which has been like corrupted in the different administrations, and also with the local people buying voices. That will one of be his aim to work on to bring up to organize a better election. And also any concerning the army, also he is said that he will, any penny that will be attributed to the army, he will go to the army. So army will to be build a strong army and a moral, not only being strong by equipment, but strong in moral to lead the country out of this trouble and fight the terrorism, but not only fighting the terrorism, to avoid them also doing some exactions to its own populations. So these are also to work on bringing a stability and a calm and a successful transition. So that's what he has been designated, and that's his task that he's going to work on it to do his best, the way he can rise up he can rise up the country back on the stage again.
Now, Mamadou, Goodluck Jonathan, who is the ECOWAS envoy, says that he hopes sanctions would be lifted following Ndao's inauguration. How soon can we expect ECOWAS to make that decision?
Yes, the ECOWAS has clarified very clearly. Mr. Goodluck Jonathan clarified that the sanction will be lifted after the appointment of a civilian prime minister, and even today, because after the meeting after the inaugurations in the CGTN, he had a meeting in Hotel Salam, a press conference, where he said that even if today the president gives them a name, there will be reports. They will report on that way to concerning the lifting of the sanctions on top of the country. So, but apart from that, there were also some amendments. There were some amendments concerning the charter, which is to define the powers attributed to the vice president, and then which has not been taken into account by the junta. It's concerning the interim president, in case if the actual president have some impeachment where he cannot lead, and the president of the vice president will take the role of the president. ECOWAS is still not agree with that because, as Jonathan said, he said they don't want to be waking up a day in a couple of months and say that there's a military at the head of this transition. That's the reason why they are following Mali, assisting Mali to nominate a prime minister, a civilian prime minister, in order so then later they can lift the sanctions. Lifted the sanctions.
And finally, Mamadou, as we've been hearing, the international community has, of course, been pushing for a return to civilian rule. What are the most urgent tasks right now for Mr. Ndao?
I don't know if I get very well the questions, but what I'm saying, I mean, it's to define the prerogative of the vice president, which should stay only on the defense and the security order. So apart from that, the president of the transition has his main task. I mean, his priorities will be firstly about the release of those responsible who has been detained by the junta during the coup of the 18th, and then also in particular the prime minister and also the president of the parliament. And secondly, it will be on the organizations of transparency elections of the coming elections, and also in nominations of the prime minister, which is also the second priority, and nominations of the prime minister, and to build a government.
All right, Mamadou Tapili, thank you very much for that. Mamadou joining us live from Bamako following the swearing in of Ba Ndao as the interim president. Moving on, the death toll from an attack by suspected rebels in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo has risen to 11. This is after 5 more people were killed on Thursday. Authorities say the overnight attack was carried out in the territory of Beni. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has that report from Kinshasa.
The bodies of the victims of the attack were found in Mutwanga village in the DRC's eastern town of Beni. Gunmen raided the village at night and shot at civilians. The discovery of the 5 bodies has raised the death toll to 11. The governor of the area says the killings were carried out by a notorious rebel group called the Allied Democratic Forces. The group originated from Uganda in the 1990s. Its fighters relocated to eastern DRC after they were forced out of their hideouts by Ugandan troops. They are accused of killing more than 500 civilians in eastern DRC since the Congolese army launched an offensive against them last October. 12 civilians and a soldier were killed last weekend in an attack blamed on the same group. The DRC has more than 100 armed groups fighting over land and the control of mineral resources. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Let's now shift our focus to the Senegalese capital of Dakar, where floods have left 3,200 people displaced following a heavy downpour that lasted 3 days. This is the most severe flooding recorded there since similar incidents in 2009 and 2012. CGTN's Wanja Mungai has the details.
A recent downpour in the Senegalese capital of Dakar has left most of the city submerged in water. In the suburb of Karmasar, residents recall the rare incident.
We had 3 days of rain, Thursday, Friday and Saturday. That's when I noticed the house was flooded. There was even water under our mattresses. Every room was flooded. We had to elevate the beds. We started removing the water, but every day more came in. My children used sand, rocks, whatever was available to stop the water. We could not even sit down in the house. We had cuts on our feet. My son just got out of the hospital because both his feet had cuts. After that, I went to see the head of the neighborhood, and he told me to come here.
Most of Kamasar's residents, like Jom, have sought refuge in camps upstream set up by the city council. However, locals complain of negligence by the government during the crisis.
We only helped ourselves. We received no official help, no financial help.
The last time a similar incident occurred was in 2009 and 2012. The government pledged to set up a flood management program worth over $1 billion. Now the civil society and the opposition are demanding for accountability from the government.
To get rid of floods, it's simple. We'll need drainage. We are 50 years late and we have to make up for it. That's what the government is trying to do. It might not be fast enough, maybe not, but in Kumasar, we dug drains in 20 neighborhoods. Today, these 20 neighborhoods, you can go visit them. You have lighting, drains, there are small park for children, we call it Project Peak. We have been setting up drains around the basins, so we started, but in Kumasar, you have 138 neighborhoods and 25 square kilometers and more than 600,000 people living here. So it's a really dense population, and that's why it's never enough.
Environmentalists say the notorious floods are a manifestation of climate change. Also, the geographical location of some of the villages like Yumbel have worsened the situation.
When there is water in South Yumbel and North Yumbel, it comes here. Then it is funneled to a larger basin next to Gwediawaye. But now the basin next to Gwediawaye is full and the water goes into houses. Some people are living with flooded homes.
The World Bank has funded projects to deal with the menace. A $73 million stormwater project is one. Locals, however, complain about bad maintenance of the systems, which is why floods got worse this time.
We are here on the edge of the lake, which was initially meant to spill used water. Unfortunately, this basin is starting to overflow because there used to be a pump to evacuate the extra water, but it hasn't been working since 2014.
The locals have been left desperate and frustrated. They are now hoping that the government will address the problem urgently. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
South Sudan's government is warning of famine due to flooding in parts of the country. The government says heavy rains have now displaced more than 1 million people while washing away crops and killing livestock. CGTN's Patrick Oyet now reports.
Rain is devastating residents in the greater Upper Nile, parts of Equatoria and Bahr Ghazal regions of South Sudan. Villages, schools, hospitals and markets have been submerged. Livestock has been washed away. Residents are left with almost nothing, and rain is still continuing.
We have nothing left here, no food, everything is washed away by water. We don't even have clean water, nowhere to go. The government should help us, otherwise we will die here of hunger.
South Sudan's government says it is short of funds due to the economic shock from the pandemic. The country's Relief and Rehabilitation Commission says it has a plan to handle flooding problems in future, but for now it is urging aid agencies to provide humanitarian assistance to those displaced as a result of the flooding.
In the future, we may call upon the government to devise a better way of designing better dikes that can be supported by both partners and the government so that we can reduce the impacts that will come in the future. We also think that there are other areas that need boats, motorized boats, and we are calling for more resources to be put across.
The United Nations says over 1 million South Sudanese people are now displaced by the floods. The UN says almost half the country is already flooded, and even if rain stops, its impact would mean many will depend on food aid for a long time. The UN and other humanitarian agencies are pledging to work together to improve the humanitarian situation, but the aid agencies need more funds.
We cannot stop delivering other essential services. We need to continue delivering health services, basic health services. We need to continue to deliver water and sanitation. We need to provide livelihood and food security. And more importantly, we need to continue to fight with the flooding situation that we are facing.
Experts are warning that rains are expected to continue until November. Many residents here will remain displaced. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, around the world, the youth climate movement returned to the streets for a national day of action. South Africans were not left behind. There were protests in Cape Town and a picket at the Medupi coal-fired power station. According to the organizers, protests took place in Durban, Port Elizabeth, Klerksdorp and Welkom. Angelo Coppola has more.
There was also a march from the union buildings. Protesters marched to the Minerals and Energy Department and the Finance Department in Tshwane, where they handed over a letter outlining their demands.
So today, what we're trying to achieve is to call on our leaders that they need to act on climate change. We have a lot of encouraging rhetoric that comes from our leaders about the need to act, but in practice, they're making the crisis worse. They're unlocking a new coal, oil and gas and a polluting trajectory for our country. So we're here to call out the hypocrisy.
People gathered from across the spectrum, all wanting to voice their concerns about how climate change had affected their lives.
We understand today is whereby we're supposed to meet together and have a say about our environment. And we are affected communities where we come from. We come from very polluted areas. So we decided to come and join the march, be part of this global day.
I'm here because I believe that this is a really dire situation we have here. And if I want a future and if no one else is going to do anything, I have to start acting and start getting people to act.
Many organizations have added their voices to the International Day of Action.
The youth have the moral authority in this question. They're the ones who are going to inherit disaster after disaster. We can see what's happening in California. We saw what happened in Australia. We know what's happening to the Arctic ice. Things are becoming very, very serious. And unless some key decisions are made very soon in the next coming months, we are in deep trouble. There will be no going back on the situation.
COVID-19 has affected everybody's lives in different ways, and even when it comes to protests, small groups are gathering, but they are vociferous because they believe in what they're doing. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Tshwane, South Africa.
Well, it's time for us to take a short break here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. Ethiopia's parliament approves the reopening of schools under strict anti-COVID measures. And meet the Nigerian doctor who's winning accolades for his fight against polio.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, China's State Council has briefed the media on the latest research and development into a COVID-19 vaccine. A leading expert says trials of a China vaccine have been encouraging.
We are seeing some positive results. China's earliest vaccine recipients were inoculated about 7 months ago. Serum tests show that they still have a relatively high level of antibodies. This means that these vaccines may provide a relatively long period of protection.
Well, a senior official from China's Drug Registration Bureau says 4 Chinese vaccine candidates are currently undergoing final stage tests in other countries. The official said China has been working on 5 types of vaccines and 11 candidates are at various stages of testing. He gave no specific time when a vaccine would be available on the market. Ethiopia's parliament has approved the reopening of schools in October after 7 months of closure because of COVID-19. The government plans to supply the schools with face masks and hand sanitizers as part of efforts to curb the spread of the virus. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi visited a school in Addis Ababa that's preparing to reopen and filed the following report.
Eden Dereje is preparing the tools of her trade. But when school resumes, it won't be the same as before.
This time will be different because you're not going to touch your kids like before. You're not going to, but you will use some kinds of techniques, your own techniques. When you would like to appreciate before the COVID-19, we will do like, oh, that's a perfect job. Keep it up. We'll touch them like this. But this time will be different. We're not going to, but we will give them an appreciation just by keeping our distances.
Eden teaches in a school that has 650 students from kindergarten level to grade 4. More classrooms have been created and each will now take at most 15 students.
We told to parents not to send anything material like biscuit, something with metal kinds of lunchbox. They should have to use the plastic one. So the kids, they can do exercise, different activities, singing, jumping, everything. In their class, we'll remove tables and chairs. This mass kinds of playing, hugging something, will not allow that one.
An isolation room has also been set up at the school.
If the students come to the compound and if they show some symptom of coronavirus, we put there in the isolation room and we only stay on 10 minutes only, because it's a serious case. So we call for their parents and they go to further hospital or for the further treatment.
Schools in Ethiopia will be reopening amid an increase in COVID-19 cases. The country has currently registered over 70,000 COVID-19 positive cases since March. Sion Getachew says making the decision to send her children back to school has been a tough one.
I felt that it was a little early, but based on the situation, everything in Ethiopia is opening up, and yeah, it's time. My students they're tired, they're depressed, staying at home. It's time for them to get back out there.
A survey by the World Health Organization in 39 sub-Saharan African countries indicates that schools are fully open in only 6 countries. In 19 countries, schools are partially open, while in 14 others, they remain closed. Ethiopia will be looking to the example of other African countries as it reopens its schools, learning from the challenges of others. For example, in South Africa, schools were forced to close down in July, just a month after they had reopened, because coronavirus cases in learning institutions had shot up. The Africa CDC advises that safe reopening of schools, like other sectors of any economy, must be done gradually, with priority being given to areas in a country that have lower virus transmission rates. As Eden prepares herself for when the government gives a definite reopening date, she knows that the new normal could open up a challenging time. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, a Nigerian physician, Tunji Funsho, has been listed as one of the 2020 Time 100 most influential people in the world. Dr. Funsho played an essential role in ensuring Africa's certification as wild polio-free in August this year. CGTN's Deji Badmus brings us the story.
He is widely regarded in Nigeria as one of the heroes in the country's fight against the wild polio virus. Dr. Tunji Funsho is the chair of Rotary International's polio eradication program in Nigeria, a position he's held since 2013. His efforts and that of other partners led to the eradication of the wild polio virus in the country and secured a polio-free certification for Africa. It's for that effort that Time has now recognized him as one of the 100 most influential people in the world this year, with the global magazine describing him as, quote, the person who did more than any other to drive polio to continent-wide extinction.
It's a very humbling feeling, and I'm very honored to have been selected amongst, Time 100 this year. It's just a vindication of the fact that if you set your eye on a target, you're willing to work towards that target, and the belief that you're going to achieve that target, no matter what the obstacles are, you get to the end of the road.
A cardiologist by training, Dr. Funsho threw himself into the wild polio virus eradication campaign in Nigeria at a time when he should be retiring. He and his team crisscrossed the country on vigorous immunization campaigns, sometimes having to confront deep-rooted religious and cultural barriers.
Our greatest challenge at the beginning in particular, and that's the late 90s and early 2000s, is an acceptance of the vaccine. That some families, based on information that was passed down to them, either by their political leaders or their religious leaders or traditional leaders, suspect the vaccine to be harmful. And of course, eventually it was shown not to be the case by the efforts of the federal government. That was a very low point after we've achieved quite a bit of coverage. And it taught us a very important lesson. That is not to assume that because you're doing good for someone or you're giving somebody something good, that they appreciate that it's something good.
Back in 1996, the wild polio virus paralyzed as many as 75,000 children across the continent, with Nigeria accounting for the highest number of cases. But today, not a single case of the wild polio virus is in Africa. Dr. Funsho, though, says maintaining that status is the next big challenge.
I've heard, some people I've been speaking with, say, why do we now still continue to immunize our children? Why do we need to be appropriating so much funds for the purpose of polio eradication? That's a major challenge. So our job lies now in advocacy to governments and at every level, to the traditional leadership, to religious leadership, and to the community we serve as well, because at the end of the day, if the community also feels that there's no more polio, why should I immunize my child? All our efforts will be in vain.
As for the Time 100 recognition, the retired cardiologist says it's a motivation for him to continue to do more to ensure polio is completely eradicated. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Turning to Tunisia now, where the 24th Chinese medical team has donated equipment to the country's health ministry. The equipment will be used to support the COVID-19 task force in its fight against the coronavirus pandemic. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi has the details.
The Chinese donation includes 1,800 surgical caps, 1,600 pairs of shoe covers, 1,040 isolation gowns, 950 pairs of clothes, face masks, and cleaning and disinfection products and equipment.
The Tunisian-Chinese partnership in the fight against COVID-19 started very early before the virus spread across the world. The Chinese government and the people have shown strong solidarity, human values and friendship by sending medical equipment and providing all forms of assistance to Tunisia.
Dr. Mohammed Miftah, the head of the Donation Commission at the Ministry of Health and a member of the COVID-19 task force, added that the Chinese authorities did not hesitate to offer technical, logistical and human support to Tunisia.
The Chinese donation to Tunisia to help fight COVID-19 factored in all our needs in terms of equipment, know-how, information and updates on the virus. The capacity of Tunisia's reference laboratories and COVID-19 centers was boosted by the Chinese support.
The Office of Tunisians Abroad at the Social Affairs Ministry in Tunis is in charge of distributing donations to hospitals and COVID-19 centers. The government agency has welcomed China's aid and called for stronger partnership with Chinese research units.
China's experience in fighting COVID-19 has been a success. It's a good example of health crisis management by relying on technology and scientific research. We encourage the scientific partnership with Chinese medical teams. Together, we can defeat the coronavirus.
The 24th Chinese medical team has provided healthcare in Tunis, Janduba and Sidi Bouzid. According to the Ministry of Health, China has been sending medical teams and donations to Tunisia since 1973. They have highly contributed to improving healthcare in many regions across the North African country. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, it's time to hand you over to Rama for the latest in business. Rama.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in business news. Sudan's quest for debt relief is suffering from yet another political setback. And Kenya's capital markets regulator is raising the red flag over Saiton's failure to pay back over $1 million to investors.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start in Sudan. Despite over a year of negotiations, the country is facing yet another obstacle to its removal from a US list of state sponsors of terror. Washington apparently is now demanding that the country normalize relations with Israel. However, 3 Sudanese government officials say that the country is resisting efforts to link these two issues. Sudan's designation as a state sponsor of terror dates back to its toppled ruler, Omar Hassan al-Bashir. The designation makes it very difficult for its transitional government to get access to desperately needed debt relief and foreign financing because it essentially locks the country out of international capital markets. Sudan's skyrocketing inflation and plummeting currency do continue to be significant challenges to Sudan's stability. In East Africa, Kenya to be specific, investors have filed complaint to the country's capital markets regulator against investment firm Saiton. They say it has failed to pay back money in one of its funds upon maturity. Now, the regulator says it has received complaints from investors who are owed over $1 million in unpaid claims. These funds are held in investment schemes which are the subject of a long and fairly bitter legal battle. Now, the spat started when Kenya's Capital Markets Authority told the Saiton High Yield Fund to reduce its investment in Saiton-managed projects to no more than 10% of the fund's total assets under management. Saiton, however, challenged that directive in the High Court, just since issued stay orders against the market regulator. For the South, authorities in South Africa say the country will adopt a risk-based system in deciding which countries will be allowed to resume flights into the country. Africa's most industrialized economy is set to reopen her international borders on the 1st of October, subject to some fairly strict regulations. Travel will be limited to countries that do not have a high rate of COVID-19 infections. For those traveling to South Africa, a negative COVID-19 test result not older than 72 hours will also be required. Failure to provide this could result in mandatory quarantine at the traveller's cost. All travellers will also be required to download a COVID-19 alert app, which will allow the authorities in South Africa to undertake contact tracing.
If people come to our country applying for visa, part of the things we're looking at, you must have, a certification that about 72 hours you tested and you were COVID negative.
We can't be quibbling about loss of revenue over a few months because the process is going to be long and hard to get passenger confidence back, to get airlines. You have seen newspaper coverage indicating airlines that have been shut down, that have been liquidated.
On to North Africa now. Tunisia's listed telecommunications company Celcom has inked a deal with the Chinese mobile device manufacturer Itel to distribute its products in the fast-growing and competitive North African market. As demand for cheap smartphones has exploded across most developing economies, Chinese tech firms like Itel, Transsion Holdings, Oppo and others have moved in to fill that gap.
Tunisia's integrated telecommunication services provider Celcom is intensifying plans to multiply commercial partnerships as it seeks to increase its market share in the extremely competitive telecommunications industry. Celcom, which distributes its products in more than 300 points of sale across Tunisia, has signed an agreement to distribute the Itel brand amid growing demand in the continent.
Celcom used to be a major player in Tunisia since more than 10 years in the smartphone sector, and we are trying to improve our portfolio. So we are collaborating with many Chinese companies regarding this sector, and we are trying to focus on innovations and bringing the value to our customers.
The Tunis Stock Exchange listed firm will distribute Itel's mobile phones amid growing demand for made-in-China brands and products in Tunisia. Itel brand is the second major telephony brand in terms of market share on the African continent and the first in terms of growth.
Mainly, we are trying to improve each time our portfolio, doing partnership with the major actors. As Itel, one of the most growing cell phone and smartphone seller in the continent, but also bringing Infinix as the first experience last 2 years was a major success in the market. And we think that bringing also Itel will bridge a gap for our end user.
The group CEO says the partnership with Itel will not be limited to Tunisia. In fact, Celcom plans to expand its business activities in the African continent.
Basically, Itel is within the continent is focusing on Africa and focusing to get good quality with the right pricing for the African continent. So we think that in Tunisia there is a need for such products as we see demand in the shops.
Mobile and technology experts say the made-in-China brands guarantee quality as well as the use of the latest technology.
Celcom Group, the Tunisian-listed company, is present in Niger, Congo and Côte d'Ivoire. Analysts assert that the recent partnership with Itel has paved the way for more successful agreements between Tunisian and Chinese groups. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Back to East Africa. In Uganda, the COVID-19 pandemic is devastating the entertainment industry. Many artists there are finding it pretty hard to fend for themselves. And artists who earn their living from street and live performances have been particularly hard hit. Now, while the authorities in Uganda have eased some of the pandemic restrictions in the country, the entertainment industry is yet to benefit. CGTN's Hilary Eyesiga takes up that story.
Yes, hello, yes, hello, yes, hello, yes, hello.
Deo Kakomo is a musician. He normally earns a living from staging street performances. But due to the COVID-19 restrictions, he can no longer entertain his fans. The Ugandan government banned public gatherings in order to contain the spread of the virus.
COVID-19 has affected my life. It cut off my source of income. As a street performer, I do not have any support.
Before the pandemic, Kakomo earned about $40 a day, but no more. As the Uganda government maintains restrictions on theatre, Kakomo has decided to switch to sand mining in order to fend for his family. But the income is not enough to meet his basic needs.
We now have 1 meal a day, and it's not even a balanced diet.
It's not yet clear when the government will ease restrictions on the entertainment industry. Uganda continues to register a rise in COVID-19 cases. The Uganda National Cultural Center is encouraging artists to use the internet to sell their products.
We've come up with innovations, how we can be able to reach out the audiences where they are online. But of course, there are challenges of data, and the internet is still expensive.
And no one in the industry knows when the lights will be switched back on. Hilary Isga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
One last story for you. This one's out of Tanzania. The country is losing hundreds of thousands of hectares of forest cover every year because of strong demand, that's still growing, for firewood and charcoal as a source of household energy. Now, to turn the tide, voluntary groups supported by the government have been seeking sustainable ways of producing biofuel as an alternative. As CGTN's Daniel Kijo reports, one group says it may have found a feasible solution.
Where others see rubbish, Asha Yusuf sees valuable raw materials. She is part of the Staki Shari Widows, a group that converts food and paper waste into charcoal briquettes. The project supports both the environment and the lives of its 15 members. Asha joined whilst battling depression after she lost her husband 4 years ago. She says it's made her life more stable.
The fears I had before have reduced because now I come to work, do the job, I collect waste, and through working at the factory, my kids now can go back to school.
Tanzania has one of the highest deforestation rates in the world. It's estimated that almost 500,000 hectares of forest area are lost each year to agricultural expansion and demand for wood and charcoal as fuel. The Staki Shari Widows believe they can help tackle the problem by producing charcoal in an environmentally friendly way.
In the past, we just threw away the waste, but now what was rubbish is now valuable to us. We use the rubbish to make our charcoal, so to use waste is wealth.
The women say their charcoal briquettes can burn for 5 to 6 hours because they are more dense, offering a more intense form of energy than firewood. Cardboard and paper waste, food peelings that have been thrown away by families around here are the valuable raw material that this group needs to transform their lives and conserve the environment. Now they say they intend to expand their operations so as to help transform more lives. African Medical Research Foundation, AMREF, sponsored this group and brought charcoal producing machines worth $6,500, which grind soot to form bars from the waste. Now they have a tractor and they can produce 500 kilograms of charcoal a day, worth $130 each day. And they intend to expand even further.
We intend to build a bigger facility that we can use as a dryer so that we can maintain production even when there is no sun or when it's raining.
The Staki Shari Widows Group says this is just the beginning. They want to motivate other widows to do the same, in the hope that they can change lives and the environment. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And we'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though, in global business. We'll be looking at the latest developments from North Africa. Egypt's central bank, of course, has cut its policy rate yet again in order to spur economic development. But did those cuts go far enough? We'll have some answers for you at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Mahia.
Rama, thank you. Well, it's time for us to take another short break. Here's what's still to come. A dance school in Kenya's largest slum inspires the next generation of leaders.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
Welcome back. Now, a dance school in Kibera, an informal settlement on the outskirts of Nairobi's capital, is inspiring young minds and paving the way for the next generation of change makers. Let's take a look.
The feeling is unexplainable. It's super amazing. When you dance, is like this feeling you're feeling. I don't know if heaven is like that, but I think heaven is that way. You just feel free, you feel happy. I'm Francis Odhiambo, born and raised in Kibera, and I'm a co-founder of Cheza Cheza Dance Foundation. You see, while I was growing up in Kibera, there are so many challenges. Like, let's talk about drugs, let's talk about gangs. You have this pressure, you're exposed to all these challenges. You find sometimes you sleep hungry. I found myself not being understood. So dance to me was a form of expression. Dance to me was a form of taking everything that was in my heart outside. I decided to change my life and also to change the kids' life, and that's how the Cheza Cheza started, and that was the motivation. In the first month, we managed to get to 12 kids. And ever since, in our 1 year and 8 months, we've managed to get now to 280 children. We have so many smart kids in Kibera. We have so many brave children in Kibera. We have like innovative kids in Kibera. But the problem now is they don't realize it. They don't know what they're having inside. All they see is like this poverty, and they believe like poverty defines them. So our work is like just helping these kids realize their full potential and trying to get opportunities for them, because me myself, I didn't get the opportunity. You know, while I was growing up, I didn't find that place where I'll say, now I belong here and I feel like, you know, this is my home. So we're trying to create that place where they feel like I belong.
We have a curriculum. We have like knowing and appreciating yourself, how the kids can appreciate themselves. It consists of self-awareness, self-esteem, stress management. Whatever we are doing here, we are growing strong minds. The important thing is we have the strong minds in them, which they can overcome the challenges and everything coming towards them.
Dance motivates me. It makes me feel happy.
I like dancing because it's my talent, it's my passion.
It is my passion, and it motivated me because out there I can be even a role model.
I see the superpower they have inside them. I see the change they are going to create, because I believe they're the future. While we are teaching these kids, we see those change makers. We are going to change so many things in this community. And after our community is Africa.
And here's what's coming up in the sport. The return of the Safari Rally to the WRC in 2020 set to boost Kenya's post-pandemic tourism.